Coming up on Primetime Lawmakers, the $19.2 billion 2013 budget, the big budget, passes the Senate, including a provision to give low-interest loans to help cover tuition for Hope Scholarship and grant-eligible students. It's the one bill the General Assembly is required to pass each year. Senate changes mean the budget now heads to a conference committee, a measure to put a type of synthetic marijuana on the controlled substances list. Chase's law passes the House. Action of the bill comes on the heels of the death of Chase Burnett, a teenager who drowned under the influence of synthetic marijuana. Legislation supporters say will save thousands of lives by requiring spouses to testify against each other in abuse cases. Passes the Senate. Two bills affecting Georgians who receive benefits pass committee. One requires drug testing and the other calls for participation in personal growth activities for those who receive benefits like welfare and food stamps. And the arrest of Kennesaw State University student Jessica Colodel in 2010 caused a firestorm when officials discovered she was an illegal immigrant paying in-state tuition at a Georgia college. The incident has sparked debate, protest, and a bill in the legislature aimed at barring illegal immigrants from attending Georgia's public colleges. We'll delve deep into the issue with Senator Barry Loudermilk, sponsor of the bill. This is a story those on both sides of the aisle will be very interested in hearing. For Wednesday, March 21st, 2012, the 36th legislative day of the Georgia General Assembly, this is Primetime Lawmakers. Good evening and welcome to Primetime Lawmakers, GPB's nightly coverage of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Scott Slade. Let's go live to the Capitol where Sasha Horn reports the Senate passes the FY2013 budget, but it's not the end of the road, is it, Sasha?
That's right, Scott. We're in the home stretch, but not quite there yet. Take a look at the latest draft of the $19.2 billion budget. It's nearly 300 pages long. It cleared committee last night, and today the Senate voted unanimously to pass it as well. Committee Chair Jack Hill says it's a delicate balancing act to keep current programs going and allocate for the future.
The 2013 budget is all about growth and funding the growth of a growing state. And funding that growth took virtually all of the resources that we had available in this budget process.
Last year, funding for the Hope Scholarship brought on a big debate. You might remember before students received 100% towards tuition, and this year it's around 80%. Now, to help make up for that difference, lawmakers have introduced a low-income loan program that bridges the gap for eligible students. Senator Jason Carter has been very outspoken about the Hope Scholarship program. Here he is on the Senate floor today.
The purpose statement that has been presented by the Senate is one that I think we can get behind. As you all know, I took the well last year in discussing this on multiple occasions and have talked about it probably too much since then. But it is an important issue about fairness, about our state keeping its promises to our students, especially our high-achieving students who receive the Hope Scholarship. And I commend them for it. I believe we can find the money. As I said last year, it is there, and we did not carry forward on that promise last year, but I am glad that the senator from the 46th has led the charge and the senator from the 6th has presented a budget, and I hope that in conference committee they'll continue to fight for those students and for that appropriation to be made.
Now, that conference committee will include members from both chambers. Their changes will then have to be approved in both the House and the Senate before the budget makes its way to the governor's desk. And victims of domestic violence could be required to testify against their spouses under new legislation that's headed to the governor's desk as well. Under the current law, victims can claim something called spousal privilege, meaning they can't be forced to testify in court. It seems mostly everyone in the Senate supported the legislation, but a last-minute amendment that made first-time offenders exempt was heavily debated. Senator Bill Cowsert, a Republican from Athens, supported that amendment.
What this amendment does is preserve that sanctity of marriage, keep the government out of it, unless there is a demonstrated pattern of repeat offenses.
This is primarily women being beaten and sometimes killed by their spouse. With all due respect, there is no sanctity in such marriage. Let's be clear. What we're saying is for a second spouse, you get the first beating free. You could have been arrested and imprisoned for domestic violence on a first marriage, second marriage, and third marriage, and be on your fourth marriage and be arrested for the first time with respect to that spouse.
Senator Renee Unterman also spoke out against the amendment. She says when she was mayor, she encountered several domestic violence victims who were vulnerable and oftentimes returned to an abusive situation out of fear.
I could cry, and they would cry, but less than 2 hours later, they would go back home. And I knew the situation they were going back home to.
Now, that same fear, she says, could keep them from testifying if they had to choose in the matter. The amendment was voted down, but the bill passed and now goes on to the governor for his signature. Scott?
Thanks, Sasha. House action took an interesting turn this morning when Representative Harry Geisinger of Roswell presented a resolution urging the U.S. Congress to prohibit the Environmental Protection Division from further regulating greenhouse gas emissions without first conducting an economic development study. This caused Democrats to oppose the resolution, saying it ignores the sciences behind global warming.
Whereas the EPA has had the audacity to consider emissions that latte-sipping, sushi-eating, Volvo-driving liberals blame for 85-degree March weather in Atlanta, hurricanes in Vermont, tornadoes across the country, and rapidly shifting ecologies across the continent, and whereas we feel unconstrained by actual science demonstrating the effects of greenhouse gases on climate, and whereas we think green energy development is for sissies, and the only way to create jobs and grow the economy is to make power a teensy bit cheaper. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Georgia House of Representatives, we would like to go on record in the annals of Georgia history that we don't give a hoot about future generations and the world that we are leaving for them, and would rather whip up our political base and pander to campaign donors by asking you, Congress, to tell the EPA to ignore mounting scientific evidence for the impending climate crisis and help powerful industries continue to pollute our air and atmosphere in whatever ways that generate the most profit.
And despite Democratic opposition, the measure did pass 109 to 52. However, it's only an urging resolution, so it doesn't carry the force of law. Now back down to the Capitol to Sandra Parrish. Well, the House passes a bill that was highlighted by the recent tragedy of the death of a Fayette County teenager, Sandra.
Scott's 16-year-old Chase Burnett died just a few weeks ago after his family says he smoked synthetic marijuana known as Spice before drowning in a hot tub. The bill was renamed for him in committee and is now known as Chase's Law.
3 weeks ago, Peachtree City, our community, suffered a tragedy. A young man, Chase Corbett Burnett, a high school junior, a soccer player, a young man that participated in Young Life, a wonderful family. I coached his younger brother in soccer. He's my daughter's age. His older brother's in his first year at the Naval Academy. Just a fine family. He was found dead at home after smoking this synthetic marijuana. This is a product that 2 years ago in the Judiciary Non-Civil Committee that we thought we had banned through the annual drug update process. Unfortunately, the manufacturers in China found a way to tweak the formulation of the drug to avoid the schedule, so now it's right back on our convenience store shelves.
The bill expands the list of the controlled substances to include chemical compounds that could be used to make any future variations of the substance. The bill goes back to the Senate to approve minor changes before going to the governor's desk. The House Judiciary Committee passes a couple of bills today dealing with those who receive state benefits. One would require anyone receiving food stamps to get a GED or other courses to advance their education. The other bill would require applicants for welfare to pass a drug test. Both bills now go to the House Rules Committee before going to the House floor. Bankers and developers packed a committee meeting today on a bill that would change the way loans are made to developers and small businesses. The measure by Senator Don Balfour sailed easily through the Senate, but has drawn opposition by both community banks and even the Tea Party.
This is a bill that would try to correct some of these problems of some of these predators out there that are making huge profits that hurt community bankers and small businesses around this state.
The bill limits the amount third-party creditors can recover from borrowers when they purchase a loan, capping the amount at the purchase price.
The Rialtos of this world who can buy loans for 20 cents on the dollar, sell them for 40 cents, make 100% profit, and then sue you for the 80 cents? You explain to me that math. You explain to me that math. They're making 100% profit on their money, and then they're suing you for the 80 cents. How could they sue you for more than 60 cents?
We believe that SB 448 would be a way that the federal regulators could see that in the hands of community banks, as opposed to in the hands of successor creditors, there's an opportunity for that bank to actually have a better recovery on the loan, not risk a loss to the shareholder capital and the people in the community that have made an investment, and give an incentive to allow that community bank to be able to work with its local borrower.
But community bankers say it will put them out of business.
This bill would completely shut down the sale of loans by banks. It would not just chill the sale of loans, it would kill the sale of notes.
This is clearly a bad bill for our industry, and it was presented really as something that would help banks. But I think it's pretty clear that with the strong support of all the bankers here today, that it's a common consensus, I think, among bankers that this is very bad policy for banks.
Even the Tea Party is opposed.
Well, ultimately, the taxpayers, the government and the taxpayers, and you'll see it in a variety of ways, including a raise in interest rates. You'll see people not be able to get credit. You'll see small businesses have a lot more difficult of a time in getting credit, as well as the fact that you're constantly on a daily basis hearing that Georgians' homes are being foreclosed on, and there is nothing about this bill that addresses anything but a bailout for the well-connected.
Now, since leaving the Senate, the measure has been changed to only include real estate and business loans. There was still some question, though, as to whether it would be retroactive or not. Scott, no vote was taken today in committee. You can expect, though, much more debate on the issue.
Walter Jones, Jim Galloway, and all of our panels of journalists said this would be a hot wire issue heading down to the end. Thank you very much, Sandra. Now, an update on two bills we've been following all session. A bill inspired by recent attacks by dogs and children passed the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Dangerous Dogs bill allows felony charges to be brought against owners of certain types of dogs if they hurt children. That bill moves on to Senate rules. Also today in Senate Judiciary, a bill passed unanimously that will make it a felony to assist someone in a suicide. There is currently no law in Georgia that prohibits assisting a suicide. Medical professionals testify with concerns on the bill, fearing that doctors would either make or not make a decision in a patient's best interest for fear of being convicted of a felony. Bill sponsor Representative Ed Setzler said that doctors and physicians are protected under the bill. The bill moves on to Senate rules now. And now a reminder that there's much more video and information available on our website. Extended interviews, complete shows, and live House and Senate streams available at gpb.org/lawmakers. Also, you can like Primetime Lawmakers on Facebook. Keep up with the Capitol News even before we go to air, online or off. Primetime Lawmakers is your source for all the news under the Gold Dome. In March of 2010, the arrest of an undocumented student at Kennesaw State University, a young woman named Jessica Colottle, touched off a firestorm of debate about illegal immigrants attending Georgia's public colleges. The Board of Regents, which oversees the university system of Georgia, responded by adopting a policy that allows undocumented students to attend Georgia's public colleges and universities under certain circumstances, except for those schools that did not admit all qualified applicants in the previous 2 years. Currently, that includes Georgia College and State University, Georgia State University, Georgia Health Sciences University, formerly Medical College of Georgia, Georgia Tech, and the University of Georgia. All undocumented students are now required to pay out-of-state tuition. Supporters of a measure currently before the General Assembly say they're simply trying to improve existing legislation, but those who oppose banning all undocumented students from state colleges and universities say a measure that passed the Senate steps on the authority of the Board of Regents. Primetime Lawmakers special contributor Mondi Lawson asked bill sponsor Senator Barry Loudermilk why he doesn't believe the Board of Regents policy is working.
They basically run the E-Verify system. They find out if someone is not here legally. They just charge them out-of-state tuition. They still put them in a classroom, a seat that may have, we've had instances to where Georgia citizen and in certain cases veterans have not been able to get a class.
Atlanta Senator Vincent Fort joined Senate Democrats in opposing the measure, which he characterizes as an attempt to disenfranchise the Board of Regents.
I believe that that's the purview. Determining what students are eligible to attend the school is in the purview of the Board of Regents. It's there now, it ought to remain with the Board of Regents.
Helen Kim Ho heads the Asian American Legal Advocacy Center. She says the measure is designed to stir up anti-immigrant sentiments, not to make college more accessible to Georgians.
This is going to schools like Gwinnett Tech, the technical and community colleges that have open enrollment. There aren't really limited seats. So there is no, if this person gets a seat, then this other person can't get a seat. That's actually not a true statement.
Some Republicans from agricultural districts, including Senate President Pro Tem Tommy Williams, have reservations about passing another piece of immigration reform legislation.
There is a law in place, and Regents ought to follow the law. On the other hand, we do have children that have been here practically their whole life that we've let go to school, and now we're saying, no, you can't go to school.
Senator Williams voted in favor of the bill, and it went on to clear the Senate March 5th by a vote of 34 to 19, including nays from Republicans John Crosby and Senate Agricultural Chairman John Bullock. Alongside a similar bill sponsored by Representative Tom Rice, SB 458 awaits a hearing before the full House. For Primetime Lawmakers, I'm Nwandi Lawson.
The illegal immigrants in college bill passed the House Judiciary Non-Civil Committee on Monday and is waiting placement on the House calendar. Just to note, both Republican senators who voted against this measure, John Crosby and John Bullock, declined our interview request. Tonight, I'm joined live by Senator Barry Loudermilk, sponsor of the legislation, who you just saw in our setup piece. Invitations to appear tonight were sent to several opponents of the measure and to the Board of Regents, too, but none were accepted. Senator, thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
For this issue that certainly keeps people talking.
It does.
Why does this need to be a legislative issue instead of Board of Regents policy?
Well, really all we're doing is clarifying legislative intent from a bill that was passed in 2006, which Senate Bill 529. Again, it stirred up a lot of controversy at the time. The legislative intent of that piece of legislation was that post-secondary education is a public benefit. Federal law states so, and we referenced the federal statute that lists that post-secondary education, meaning public post-secondary education, is a public benefit, and federal law states that states cannot extend any taxpayer-funded public benefit to those who are illegally in this nation. The Board of Regents took it upon themselves to reinterpret that term, public benefit, and state, well, it's only a public benefit if they receive a direct compensation or they receive in-state tuition. So they started using the E-Verify system just to determine whether to charge an out-of-state tuition or in-state tuition. So all we're doing is clarifying. The legislative intent was all post-secondary education, our universities, colleges, and technical schools, is a public benefit.
Even without a state tuition, even without
a state tuition, because if you look at it, about 15% of our budget goes to technical colleges and university systems. Not all of that money goes to subsidized tuition. A lot of that goes to capital improvements. It goes to the buildings. It goes to the computer systems, to the housing. So the fact that you are attending one of these colleges or universities, you are receiving a public benefit.
One of the arguments against doing this is that it involves, and Chancellor Huckabee even said this, it involves such a small number of people. You're talking about a percentage of a percent, 300, I think, in the total system is what Chancellor Huckabee said. And while that doesn't excuse a wrong, right, on the other hand, it says that, don't we have bigger fish to fry, and can't we let our policy work?
Well, really all we're doing is clarifying what legislative intent was. Okay. We are the body that's elected by the people to represent the will of the people, and you see what happened at Kennesaw State. There was an outcry of the people. There was testimony earlier that there aren't seats taken away from Georgia citizens, but we've had testimony otherwise in committee and on the Senate floor that we know that there are seats that have been taken away from, including active duty military and returning veterans that have tried to get into classes. So, my heart really does go out to those students whose parents brought them here. They are here illegally, but the fact remains is even if they go through school, they get a bachelor's degree, master's degree, or doctorate degree, you can't get a job in this nation if you're here illegally.
Taking this a step further and talking about perhaps erasing the idea of public benefit, has anyone actually figured out what the bottom line cost would be, adding in all those factors you talked about, everything from depreciation of the buildings to the, to tenured teachers, just what that price tag would be, and make that at least a path to these folks?
I don't believe we've taken that approach, because until just recently we haven't even started tracking who is legal and who is illegal. I know the state of Alabama has passed legislation that allow them to actually calculate the cost of the public schools, K through 12, to find out what is the cost of educating the children of illegal immigrants in the K through 12. And so we haven't in the past. I think we are in a position now where we can start tracking that. But the intention of this bill is just simply to ensure that the Board of Regents is following what the legislature intended.
It's a gut-wrenching issue. I mean, you heard Senator Wynn just a moment ago talking about how conflicted he was about it. Do you see a time one day maybe where there is a way to make this happen, particularly for the kids who were brought here not of their own will, grew up here? I mean, they're not as little as Mexican as I might be, you know, to be able to go through this. Do you ever see a path to make that happen somehow?
Well, there may be in the future, but one of the issues that we have right now, this is about taxpayer-funded benefits. You know, as we've talked about here, and you've talked about the budget. The budget is tight. The economy is down. There is people are scraping the bottom, as well as the state has. Our resources are limited, and so what we're talking about is these taxpayer dollars are to go to those who are Georgia citizens, U.S. citizens, or who are here legally. And so we just have to be frugal with that. There's the talk of a DREAM Act that, you know, that may come about at some point. But, you know, right now, the people of Georgia have spoken. And again, I mean, it is a difficult call, but it is the rule of law that we're talking about. This is what the people of Georgia have spoken. And again, this only affects the public colleges and universities. This does not apply to the 25 private colleges in the state of Georgia, such as, you know, Berry College and Shorter College. Some of the finer colleges we have here, that would be up to their local policies.
Thank you so much for taking time to come down and explain your views on this. It's great to meet you. Great to see you. Thanks for your service.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. For expanded coverage of this issue, visit the Primetime Lawmakers website at gpb.org/lawmakers. And now Primetime Lawmakers Jackie Britton joins us live for the Capitol with other headlines from around the state. Jackie.
Thanks, Scott. Here are your state headlines for tonight. If your business is looking for a new home, consider Jekyll Island. The island is looking for shops and restaurants to fill 35,000 square feet of retail space. Jones Hook's executive director for the Jekyll Island Authority said that the plan calls for 3 retail buildings with space for 15 shops and 2 restaurants. The retail space is part of a makeover to jumpstart tourism, and construction should begin this fall. Statewide coffee lovers, listen up. Governor Nathan Deal announced today that Starbucks Coffee Company is planning to invest $172 million in its first manufacturing plant in Augusta. Starbucks said it expects to create more than 140 direct jobs and hundreds of indirect jobs associated with construction. Construction should start this spring. For more information on these and other stories, be sure to visit www.gpb.org/news. And that will do it tonight for your headlines around the state. Scott, back to you.
All right, thanks very much, Jackie. We've got to take a short break in Primetime Lawmakers, but don't go anywhere. After the break, I'll be joined by Tom Crawford of the Georgia Report and Christina Torres of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Political analysis you can't afford to miss. There's a lot going on at the last minute. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Primetime Lawmakers. Time for our Reporter Roundtable, part of the show where we tap our stable to the best political journalists in the state. Tonight I'm joined by Tom Crawford, editor of the Georgia Report. Tom's been covering Georgia politics for over 30 years. And Christina Torres of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Christina specializes in legislative and education issues. Thanks so much for both of you being here. And here we are. What, 5 days to go? Is it 4 days now? I'm lost track. 4 days, thanks. Today was...
You can hear people going, whoop, whoop.
I guess they are. And maybe 3 days next week. We could have sine die for the 1st of April, Tom?
I think we will. They right now the plan is to be out of here by Thursday, March 29th, and that would be one of the earliest adjournments we've had in a while.
Let's talk about a couple of the big things left on the burner right now. Of course, one of the biggest things is the criminal justice reform, sentencing reform. Christina, where's that going?
Well, it's, you know, this is something that Deal wants. They've taken their time. They made a proposal that the governor sort of pulled back a little bit to make sure it's exactly what he wants. You know, they've gone through committee. I think it will hit the floor at the House tomorrow, and I'm going to be surprised if it does not pass.
It'll pass, and they'll have it before the Senate early next week, and it will get done just before the end of the session, I think.
And really, the benchmark inside of this against reform is saving the state some money. They're still putting aside plenty of money for beds for violent offenders.
Absolutely.
But they're going to try to find new ways to treat nonviolent offenders. And talk about this just a second. Well, the fact that they'll deal with drug offenders maybe, I don't want to say more leniently, but in a different way, will that cause controversy?
Well, I think that one of the concerns was, among some lawmakers at least, that they don't want to be seen as soft on crime. These sentencing laws that came down, you know, it was all about getting tough on crime, you know, protecting our communities. This is an election year. I think lawmakers had that in the back of their mind. That said, you know, we went through last year, you know, the committee, the study group that looked at this, they came out with a number of recommendations. Those recommendations Deal supports, and that's why I'll be surprised if it doesn't pass. He's pushing it hard.
Tom?
Well, when you make these kind of proposals, proposed changes, you will get a lot of concerns expressed by sheriffs, DAs, prosecutors, people like that, which is one reason it takes a long time to get this through. But I think they've been able to strike the kind of balance where they can get most of the package done now.
Not unlike what they did with tax reform. They made that a lot more palatable, didn't they? And things moved along quickly.
They did. I mean, you talk to someone like Speaker Ralston, he'll point out they've been working on this for a couple of years now. It's not without controversy. I have heard some senators, since the Senate will take it up tomorrow, expressing some concern about the internet, actually making people pay sales tax on the internet, the Amazon tax. I think that will be part of the debate tomorrow in the Senate. That said, again, this is something Deal has been pushing. He's been working with leadership at the Capitol. You know, they're calling it sort of a jobs bill. Again, it's an election year, and that's what they want.
They want something big to run on, and that gives them something big to run on.
Will there be a mechanism to enforce that internet sales tax collection? That's been a problem in the past.
That's going to be kind of a work in progress, but the important thing is to get a law on the books that says for the first time you have to pay the tax if you're buying stuff online. That was a big hurdle to get over, and if the bill passes, which I think it will, then they will be there. Now, as Christina noted, some folks are a little bit hesitant to approve a tax increase, and it is a tax increase. And I know some of the Tea Party groups have said that that's one of the things they really don't particularly care for, but I think that represents maybe the biggest step of all as we move forward with these tax changes.
Okay, the bill's on the fringe. Let's talk about that. Benefits testing, the drug testing for welfare benefits, or taking GED courses to be able to get benefits.
The personal growth,
yes.
I think
yes.
the sponsor calls it. That bill is passed through House committee. We'll see if it gets to the House floor. As we mentioned, we have 4 days. There are a couple drug testing bills. One is in the Senate and one is in the House. They switched over. I know the one that the Senate passed on crossover day, controversial. I'm not sure, again, that that's going to make it all the way. There's a concern about the constitutionality. We'll see.
Fourth Amendment problem there. And abortion. The new 20-week cutoff, the fetal pain bill, Tom, that is going to cause a stir before things are done.
It will, but it came out of a Senate committee, I think, after a Monday hearing. It's going to get a vote on the Senate floor. I see it passing, and maybe that does trigger some problems in the courts later on, but again, it seems to have some momentum behind it.
All right, so two huge things left to come: criminal justice reform and tax reform. And what do we do after that?
After that, they can pretty well call it a day and go home. We've still got to take care of the final tweaks to the budget, of course, and I don't think that'll take long because there really aren't major differences between the two versions. So you get that, you get all those two major bills done, and that's really it.
As we keep hearing, there's not that much money to fight over, is there?
No.
Thank you both for joining us, as always.
Thank you.
We'll be reading you and watching you. Thanks a lot. Coming up tomorrow on Lawmakers, the House and Senate are expected to have busy days. The House will likely take up criminal justice reform, and the Senate is poised to tackle the tax overhaul bill. That measure passed House yesterday. It's the end of legislative week, so it's time for Buddy Darden and Bill Crane. They'll bring refreshing analysis and insight. It's always great to have them. Plus, all the latest news from under the Gold Dome tomorrow on Primetime Lawmakers at 7. Live coverage of tomorrow's and everyday's sessions available on our website, gpb.org/lawmakers. While you're there, check out our extended interviews and other videos, including an extended look at that illegal immigrants and college story we ran tonight. Legislative coverage available 24/7 at gpb.org/lawmakers. And as long as you're there, like us on Facebook, okay? If you missed any part of this broadcast, you can catch Primetime Lawmakers when it repeats at 5:30 tomorrow morning. Next on GPB, it's Georgia Traveler. On tonight's episode, visit Helen during Oktoberfest and explore some of the world's fascinating animals and their babies at Zoo Atlanta. That's coming up on GPB. Have a great night.
This is a GPB original production.